few sessions in to the Edge of the Empire campaign that I've been running, I'm really becoming aware of interesting results which are happening because of the dice. Now, the way that I'm running the game is to plan out locations and the people in them, and then some kind of relationship between those locations. So when we introduced the characters, it was decided in character creation that they all knew each other and had been working together for quite some time. So their relationships to each other were professional for the most part, and with some friendships. And they had kind of an emotional connection, or at least a connection of convenience to the vessel that they travel around in. The connection or the hook into the first story was simply a job. This is Edge of the Empire. It's focused on people living on the outer rim, the outer edges of the Star Wars universe, galaxy, and trying to get by in this frontier kind of atmosphere. So they had an opportunity to take a job. Now the players got a chance to preview this contract and approve it before we played. Yes, they'd like to take on this contract. So I prepared the one contract with the one group of people who were putting it forward, with the opposition to that group of people being given shape in my NPC file. And of course, then there's the Empire. And the story in question behind the contract was about a rebel base. And this rebel base had been in full operation, had been discovered by the Empire, and the Empire moved in to wipe it out. And the twist in this particular scenario was that during the orbital bombardment and retreat from the base, that the Imperial forces had been called away. So the rebels flee. This base is useless to them. The Empire knows it's here. And the retreat of the forces means that more of their tail end escaping forces actually get to escape, but not all of them. So the contract itself was a retrieval mission, and part of the bonuses, or part of the perks that go along with the contract, was you can keep whatever salvage you find. We're not interested in the salvage. We just want this one thing. And so they take the job and they go. Now this leaves me as the game master thinking, well, what are the various timelines involved in this scenario? And how will these narrative dice impact what's going on? Because the dice can return results like success and failure, but these success and failure results are also tempered with advantage and threat, triumph and despair. So what kind of influence in a traditional game session will they have, really? I mean, is this just something that adds a little perk, or is this something that has a monumental, far-reaching effect? And of course, it comes down to interpretation. You could just focus on combat and focus on the list of charted effects. If you get 3 advantage, you can buy this effect in combat, or normally you can. This is a suggested effect for you to buy in combat, that sort of thing. But how does it apply to other areas? Piloting checks, negotiation checks, slicing into computer systems, and so on. So, toward the end of this first story, they're escaping. Our characters are escaping from the rebel base, and they have programmed a lightly damaged ship that they found to serve as a decoy. So it's going to go off one way and jump into hyperspace, and they're of course going to go the other way, and at least splitting the forces which are arrayed against them. Because what I had decided was that there was a timeline. There was a timeline when Imperial forces would be sent back to at least mop up or finish the job, or deal with any issues that might arise because of any warlike material that was left behind. So it was just a matter of time before a Star Destroyer and its ground forces and squadrons of TIE fighters and whatnot would show up. And there was no way for the crime boss who was giving them the contract to know what that timeline was. Lots of factors could influence when the team actually got to the planet and started investigating the base, and a lot of those factors were in their hands. How well their astrogation was handled, when they chose to leave, how stealthy they were coming into the system, and so on. There was one trap set for them in the form of a sensor buoy, which would send off an automated signal if any ship entered that system. So they arrive, they trigger the sensor buoy, and they react appropriately. They put themselves on a very strict timeline. They figure out what is the earliest possible time for an Imperial squadron to show up based off of this signal, and they plan to leave long before that time limit could be reached. It's good planning on their part. But they don't know about the regularly scheduled, already planned, already in motion group that's due to arrive soon. Now, because they had arrived so early, the Imperial fleet doesn't really show up until they're just about ready to leave. It was actually perfect timing as far as dramatics are concerned, and it had nothing to do with my decision as a game master. It had everything to do with their decisions as players and the way that the dice worked, the advantages or the disadvantages that showed up on the dice. Now, the particular scene that I want to talk about had a very interesting role attached. So it's as the players are leaving the planet, and they know that there has to be a Star Destroyer or something similar up there because they've seen TIE interceptors and a shuttle land. So as they're fleeing, they've got their eyes peeled, and they have to make it to this derelict transport in order to actually get what they came for. It wasn't on the planet at all. And all of this, they're calculating the amount of time that they need. And piloting role is called for. How well the patrols of TIE fighters are avoided. How much time the course they set up to this derelict gives them compared to the closing rate of the Star Destroyer and the other vessels. All of these things. And so we get this roll. And I'd like to actually show it to you. So this roll ended up being one where it was a little difficult to assess how I should interpret it. And if you haven't played Star Wars, that might not make a lot of sense, but let's get into it. So as you can see, I have a lot of stuff in here. I use chips for wounds and for strain, and I use stones that I got from the local strategy game, Paduk, which uses black and white stones on a large grid. And you may have seen similar games to this from other countries or versions of this game, like Othello, where black and white stones cancel each other out. But I use these for the Dark Force destiny points and for the Light Force destiny points. They're very smooth and rounded, and I kind of like them. So at the beginning of the session, the characters roll for their destiny pool. And the first two sessions,
they really didn't get any light side points at all, and which encouraged me as the game master to spend a lot of dark force points against them to build up their pool. And but in this last session, they were just swimming in light force points, so that was great. Anyway, the roll itself.
Now, the base pool for the piloting check was this. It had a difficulty rating of 3 dice, and the pilot is able to throw 3 dice, reflecting his skill. But this isn't the pool that he actually used. This is the pool that he actually used, because what happens is his controlling characteristic determines the number of dice that he gets. And his skill level, which was 2, controlled how many dice he can upgrade from skill dice to proficiency dice. And the same sort of thing is going on with the difficulty, except I spent a dark force point to make things more interesting, to upgrade one of the difficulty dice. Okay. Then, because of the situation, they ended up with boost and setback dice being added in. And it's just more fun to throw them both together. You might want to, consider canceling them out before they ever enter the pool, I suppose, but I just enjoy being able to have my thoughts and the player's thoughts slowly build the pool as it's being described. So this was the pool that he actually threw. So these are the results. And if you look carefully, you'll see that this symbol is failure. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 failures. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 successes. So things going wrong counteracted things going well, leaving us balanced. But we have 1 threat, and we have 1, 2 advantage. So when we clear away everything that's canceled out, we're left with advantage. And this was a piloting roll, not to see if they could, not crash. This was a piloting roll to see how well they could avoid the Imperial forces, how much time they could give themselves. And they didn't get any successes on this roll, meaning, in my mind, as the game master, that pretty much right away the Imperial forces should be heading for them. They had been fooled by the decoy that they had set up, but as soon as they see the second ship, and this of course is the second ship that had triggered the sensor buoy, and that was represented by this setback die, they broke off pursuit of the decoy, and so what constitutes this advantage without success? How does that actually work? Now, of course, as we played, it wasn't just situations that were based on getting advantage and no success. There were also situations where they got threat and no success. And the same kind of interpretation had to be made. So the way I'm looking at it is that there needs to be sensitivity to how many of these advantage or disadvantage symbols you have left. Now, in the case of the piloting roll, the roll was framed so that what it represented was being able to create enough of a gap, right, between the forces which may come and intercept them, that they'd have time to get onto the derelict, search for and find what they were looking for, and get away again. That would constitute success. Failure would be that those things couldn't happen. But we ended up in this state with no success, no failure, and advantage. 1 advantage symbol. And so you can't just sit there and think about it. You have to go with your instincts. And so I've really been enjoying this. The interpretation that I made at the time was that, the patrols had bought the decoy hook, line, and sinker, and it's it's shooting off in the other direction. So the patrols have a good distance to travel. Now, as soon as the second ship is spotted, and it's spotted because they got no success, not because they fail, this patrol of TIEs turns around. All right, but it was two different patrols. There was interceptors and there were TIE fighters. So they have advantage. So what I decided in the end is that the decoy ship was just about to go into hyperspace. So what happens is these four TIEs, two TIE fighters, two TIE interceptors, are ripping off after this transport vessel, and it goes into hyperspace. And so the TIE fighters, being slower and the interceptors being faster, you would expect the interceptors to be ordered to peel off and take the new threat. So what I did was have the opposite happen. The TIE fighters are sent to the new, more slowly moving ship, where the interceptors are left pursuing the fleeing other transport. As soon as it makes the jump to hyperspace, they are then redirected. But they are coming to the derelict. But what I have them do is delay for a turn to pick up an escort roll over TIE bombers. Now the TIE bombers are coming in at a very slow rate of speed. So the interceptors are still there. They're still a threat. They can still accelerate and come in at attack speed if necessary. But what I did was up the stakes. So they have the advantage. They have the time they need, because that's what the roll was about. They have the time they need to get onto the ship and search for the thing that they're looking for. But the longer they stay, the more peril that they're in. And by giving them a little advantage now, one advantage success, and an opportunity to completely change the situation, to reset the palette, as it were, I thought would be the best way to interpret the roll. And it turned out that we had a very, very exciting encounter with strafing runs down the spine, the broken spine of the derelict transport, and our first battle in space, and a hint that maybe the Imperial forces in this sector, the end of the universe, don't operate with the precision and tactical awareness that perhaps they should. And the more a threat our characters become, the higher quality soldier will be sent against them. And not to belittle their accomplishment, they were incredible, both in their tactics and their use of their resources and their flair. They really caught the spirit of Star Wars, the high action, the high risk maneuvers, the self-sacrifice for the sake of others. It all manifested, and it all ended up working for them this time.